What's going on, Guardians? It's Sizzle here, and in this video, I want to commend Bungie on their amazing boss design for the two bosses in the Vesper's Host dungeon. For the longest time in Destiny, we've had bosses where you would just post up and fight, and while we often had enemies and the boss shooting at us, for the most part, we were able to just face tank it all and sit in a well of radiance and go to town on the boss. The vast majority of dungeon bosses and raid bosses fall under this category. The bosses are generally pretty stationary. Eventually though, Bungie got tired of Well of Radiance being the meta, and before they nerfed Well itself, they designed the first really dynamic boss in Rulk. Rulk would actually move around and kick you and run around the arena and do his blast attack. You had to stay moving. Standing in a well was not going to get the job done. Yes, people found a way to draw his aggro and make him easy to control and lay into, but this is more of an exploit than a problem with Rulk's design and attack patterns. He's a very dynamic boss. Bungie then followed this up with Nezarec. And again, until people found that you could stand in certain spots to basically negate him doing damage to you, this was pretty good boss design. We also had some bosses like Atrax, which were duplications, so you had to run back and forth and do damage to the different bosses, and these were very quick burst damage scenarios. Very unique for its time, given before that you usually had a longer damage phase. And Riven was also a very unique fight too until people learned how to cheese her. So I'm not saying that we've had only one type of boss in Destiny, but for a large majority of bosses, the damage phases consist of stand in one spot and do damage, and then sometimes move and do damage in another spot like Golgoroth or Callus, or the Ogre boss in Warlord's Ruin, the Locus of Wailing Grief. Again, in these boss battles, sometimes you do have enemies to deal with that are rushing you, but these enemies often just help you. They're typically weak-ass red bars that you can usually just use to your advantage to proc things like Roaring Flames or build up Worm God stacks or Death Throws for Verity's Brow. These enemies never really pose much of a threat, and good teams could leverage them to their benefit. Then Bungie released Salvation's Edge and we had to fight the Witness, a boss with attack patterns that you had to dodge or you would wipe. And Well of Radiance was nerfed in the final shape, so you couldn't just sit in one spot and go to town on the boss. You had to move or you would die. But even with that, the attack patterns were extremely predictable. If you went back left, then you would go front right next, and then now and again you had to jump. People got so good at this that they could actually use Whisper on the Witness and never have to unscope. But in Vesper's Host, Bungie has really turned boss design on its head. It introduced us to a few concepts we have yet to see in Destiny. The boss spawns puppets, but these guys are actually boss type enemies. They can't be disoriented by a GL shot. They behave like bosses in Destiny, making them much more threatening, and they also hurt pretty bad. So it's not like you can just ignore them like you can red bars on so many other boss fights. And you can't really just quickly kill them either in one shot to proc something like Impetus on Merciless. I mean, you still can, but it is going to take more than one shot to do so. On top of this, you have to stay moving damn near constantly. The anomaly discharges the boss launches onto the battlefield will one-shot you if you get caught standing on the ground in the middle of one when it strikes. And even then, there is a lingering arc pool that drains your health quickly if you land in it. So now we have a boss damage phase where the floor is essentially lava and you have to stay moving. On top of this, the boss is moving around on platforms and it's somewhat random, like if it will go left or right, you don't always know. Keitel was similar in this regard. She would head into the room and you had to react to the way that she was moving. But the Corrupted Puppeteer fight is nothing like what we've encountered in a boss fight. Rulk is the closest example in my opinion, where you have to be constantly moving and get damage in where you can. And because of this, damage over time weapons have quickly risen to the top of the meta on this boss. Lost Signal and Anarchy are great here because it allows you to deal damage and then focus on moving to a safe spot on the battlefield, or focus on taking out the threatening boss clones. All this makes for a boss fight that is fun, dynamic, and unique each time you run it. One thing that is so boring in Destiny is once you learn an encounter, you know it for good. And I know there are crack players out there who have solo 2-phased this boss, which is very impressive, and they do know the pattern, the boss moves, and when to get off the platform before the lightning strikes come down, but even then, no two runs are the same, where with so many other bosses, the boss fight setup and then the DPS phases are all exactly the same. So even in those solo 2 phases, those are a result of the player knowing exactly how to react and when it's safe to attack. And yes, that is because they have in-depth knowledge of the fight, but they are also good at reacting to what the boss is throwing at them. They are getting damage in when it is safe and then taking out the clones when they can, all while avoiding the lightning strikes on the ground in between. Sadly, there is a cheese spot in this fight which allowed players to mitigate this boss design, just like with Rulk and Nezarec. But if you fight the Corrupted Puppeteer as intended, then it is the most dynamic boss fight in the game because you are always reacting to what is around you. I know the puppets spawn in every 20 seconds, and the one holding the core always spawns in the same spot, so you can be ready for those things, but again, you still have to react to them and deal with them or they will kill you, all while paying attention to the lightning strikes from above. We've never had a boss fight with so much going on. And yes, there is also a safe spot where you can stand on the tanker, which is fine because this allows for build agency. If you want to use the tanker, then you have to take out the enemies or they will kill you there. Or you have to bring a Well of Radiance or some type of healing, or you'll still die standing there. But what I love about this boss fight is it focuses on using a DPS strat that balances ease of use with good damage output, which is why Grand Overture is so great for it. Back in June, I made a video talking about how easy DPS is often better than optimal DPS because it's safe and consistent to do. If you die during an optimal DPS rotation, then you're useless. Dead DPS is no DPS. In our contest mode clear, I had one phase of damage where my damage was absolutely horrible because I was just trying to stay alive. And sometimes that floor is almost covered in lightning, so I couldn't do much. But on the day one where revive tokens really mattered, that was more important than doing big damage. It was better to stay alive and get damage in where I could, and that is another novel concept that we aren't used to with bosses, where you have to weigh easy and safe damage versus optimal damage. On damn near every boss in the game, there is a pretty predictable meta. But on this boss, it's completely different, and that is thanks to its boss design. The real meta now is Kira's Thunder Crash Titans with Anarchy and Lost Signal and super generating mods to get your super 3 times in a damage phase. And because Prismatic Consecration Titan is busted, it is like the one thing in the game that can take out even those boss type enemies very quickly. So the duplicate puppets can be destroyed by a slam attack and help you get your super back, and you can deal damage over time to the boss while taking them out. This is a fun and unique meta like nothing we've ever seen. And what's better is it rewards aggression and great movement. Destiny has long been a game of good movement. Armin GT did the best Destiny video I've ever watched, breaking down how to move and avoid enemy attacks. And I know he would just love this boss fight if he still played the game, because it's actually engaging and rewards being able to read and react, where so many bosses in the past let you just lay into them while being stationary in a well. The only boss fight that I can think of that has really rewarded you for good movement is the Kel Echo, the final boss of the Prophecy dungeon, because you have to stay moving forward to deal damage to it. So when you move platforms and where you move to really matters. The Corrupted Puppeteer is also a 2-minute long boss fight as well, which is longer than any other DPS phase in Destiny by quite a bit, which is another thing that makes it so fun and unique. In that video talking about consistent DPS versus optimal, I also spoke from the perspective of a solo player. Yes, if you can one phase a boss with a high DPS setup, that's great, but in solo play, you also need weapons with good ammo economy. And again, that is where things like Anarchy Mountaintop and Grand Overture come into play. They have insanely high total damage and great ammo economy, perfect for a long boss phase like this. But I'm not done there. The first boss of Vesper's host is Raneiks Unified, which is another totally unique boss fight. So even with those dynamic bosses I mentioned, they were all just one boss. Atrax is really the only boss I can think of where you sort of fight multiple of them. Where Raneiks, you have to deal damage to many enemies at once. And once again, this brings about a unique damage meta that we've never seen before, an AoE type damage meta, being able to deal damage to multiple enemies at once. Snipers are great on Oryx because you just sit back and blink away at a giant crit. This is basically the opposite. You have like 9 servitors to do damage to at once, so things like Glacial Quake have quickly risen to the top of the meta. It deals massive AoE damage, and it has long been one of the best supers in the game, but you need a giant target to make it deal a lot of damage. So it's absolutely perfect for this fight as it can basically hit all the servitors at once. Or heavy waveframe grenade launchers are also excellent here as they can hit lots of servitors at once as well. And because they are coded as miners, Wardcliff Coil is also pretty good here. The point is, it is a unique boss that you have to use supers and weapons that can hit multiple targets at once, which is something we've never really had to do. And the result of all this is a really fun and refreshing dungeon that is a break from the mold of what we are used to, and it's so nice to see new and fun damage metas rise to the top that we don't typically see. Anyways, that's it for the video. I just wanted to talk about why these boss fights are so fun and unique compared to what we normally see in Destiny. If you enjoyed the video, then a like and sub would be greatly appreciated. How have you been liking Vesper's host? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and take care.